A single dad billionaire CEO hears his son on the phone. My dad's super nice and single. He chokes on his drink, before freezing in shock when he realizes who the little boy is talking to. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching us from, and please like this video to support the channel. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Henry pushed his toy truck across the living room floor, glancing at his dad's office door every few minutes. The door was shut tight, muffling Caleb's tense voice as he talked numbers and deadlines. Henry rolled his eyes. Ever since he'd heard Caleb grumbling about the merger with Ava Hastings' company, his dad had been even grumpier than usual. A soft ring broke the silence. The office phone. Caleb's annoyed tone slipped through the door, something about just a second. But the phone didn't stop ringing. Henry sprang up, deciding to help. After all, how hard could it be to answer a call? He tiptoed into the office, gripping the edge of the desk to haul himself into Caleb's oversized leather chair. The caller ID blinked with a name he recognized from overheard conversations, Ava Hastings. Henry hit the green button. McKinsey Industries, hi, he chirped. There was a pause. Oh, hello. I was expecting Mr. McKinsley, a woman's voice replied, smooth and surprised. Henry swung his legs. Dad's busy talking about boring stuff. I can take a message. A laugh floated through the speaker. That's very professional of you, she said. Who am I speaking to? Henry, he declared proudly. I'm Caleb McKinsley's son. Are you Miss Ava? I am, she said, amusement clear in her tone. Nice to meet you, Henry. Henry grinned. Nice to meet you too. Did you know my dad's super nice and single? The words tumbled out before he could second-guess them. Another pause, longer this time. Then a laugh. Oh, is he now? Henry nodded vigorously, even though she couldn't see him. Uh-huh. But he's always so serious. He really needs to smile more. Maybe you could help? Well, that's an interesting suggestion, Ava said, sounding like she was trying not to laugh. And what do you think I should do about that? Henry hummed, kicking his legs back and forth. Maybe you could ask him to dinner? He likes that Italian place on 5th with the garlic bread. I'll keep that in mind, Ava said, definitely smiling now. Does he like anything else? Henry, now fully enjoying his role as wingman, launched into a list. He likes coffee, but not the bitter kind, and he watches those boring nature documentaries at night. Oh, and he likes when people aren't scared of him. Everyone at his office is scared of him. Ava chuckled. I see. Sounds like you know him well. Yup, Henry said, proud. A beat of silence. Sure. Yes. That sounds fine. Caleb stammered, throat dry. Perfect, Ava said, smooth and amused. Looking forward to it. Caleb hung up with a dazed look. Henry, still perched on the edge of the desk, beamed. You're welcome, he said, far too smug for a 7-year-old. Caleb sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Henry, you can't just… Did she say yes? Henry interrupted, eyes wide with hope. Caleb's glare softened. Yes, but that's not the… Henry whooped, fists pumping the air. I knew it. See, Dad? You just need to trust me. He hopped off the chair, patting Caleb's arm like a tiny business coach. You're gonna do great. Caleb groaned. This isn't a date. It's business. Henry smirked, skipping out of the office. Sure, Dad. Whatever you say. Caleb slumped into his chair, running a hand through his hair. A dinner meeting with Ava Hastings. Because his son had, apparently, become his personal matchmaker. Wonderful. The next day, Caleb fidgeted in front of the restaurant, checking his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Ava appeared through the crowd, graceful and composed, her smile disarming. Caleb straightened, nearly dropping his phone. Mr. McKinsley, she greeted, lips twitching at his stunned expression. Ava, he managed, hoping he didn't look as flustered as he felt. Thanks for, agreeing to this. She arched a brow. Well, I couldn't refuse after such a persuasive pitch from your son. Caleb groaned. About that. She waved a hand, eyes twinkling. Relax. Henry is charming. You should listen to him more often. Caleb's lips quirked despite himself. He's persistent. I noticed. Her laugh was light. Shall we? Inside, the conversation flowed easier than Caleb anticipated. Ava was sharp, witty, and entirely too good at making him lower his guard. By the time dessert arrived, Caleb had forgotten to even mention the merger. As they stepped outside, Ava paused, glancing at him with a smile that sent his heart stumbling. This was nice, she said softly. Caleb cleared his throat. Yes, it was. Maybe we could do this again sometime? The words slipped out before he could rethink them. Ava's smile widened, warm and genuine. I'd like that. Caleb exhaled, tension he hadn't realized he was holding melting away. As he walked home, Henry's smirk was waiting by the door. Told you, Henry said, far too pleased. You're welcome. Caleb rolled his eyes, ruffling his hair. Don't make this a habit. Henry only grinned wider. No promises. Caleb spent most of the next day mentally preparing for the dinner with Ava, running through financial figures and potential rebuttals like a script. By the time he stepped into the restaurant that evening, his shoulders were tense, and his jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. Ava was already there, a glass of wine in hand, waving him over with a smile that seemed far too warm for a business negotiation. Caleb approached, clearing his throat. Hope I didn't keep you waiting, he said. Not at all. Besides, Henry warned me you might be late. Caleb choked on nothing. He what? Ava's eyes glinted with amusement. He also mentioned that you're a sucker for garlic bread. Caleb groaned inwardly. I'm sorry about that. He's enthusiastic. Charming, she corrected, lips twitching. You're lucky to have such a wingman. Caleb's ears warmed. This is a business dinner, he blurted, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. Of course, Ava said, eyes sparkling with mischief. So tell me, Mr. McKinsley, what's your favorite movie? Caleb blinked. My movie? Henry said it's the one with all the space battles and confusing timelines. Caleb pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm going to kill him. Ava laughed, and the sound was warm enough to melt the tension in his shoulders. Caleb found himself relaxing despite his best efforts, giving in to the smile tugging at his mouth. Dinner was nothing like he expected. Ava asked more about Henry's favorite school projects than profit margins and admitted to bribing her nephew with ice cream to behave at board meetings. Caleb, against all odds, found himself talking about the time he'd nearly set the kitchen on fire trying to make Henry's birthday cake and the disaster that was their last family game night. By the time dessert arrived, Caleb had forgotten the merger entirely. Outside, they paused beneath the glow of streetlights. Ava's gaze was soft, teasing. That was more fun than I expected, she said lightly. Yeah, Caleb said, almost surprised at how much he meant it. Maybe we could do this again sometime? Another business dinner? Her lips quirked. Something like that, he said, ears warm. Ava's eyes glinted. I'll hold you to that. Caleb couldn't help the small smile that lingered long after she'd driven away. Back home, Henry was waiting, practically bouncing in place. So? He demanded. Did you kiss her? Henry, Caleb groaned, shrugging out of his coat. Did you at least hold her hand? Henry pressed, eyes wide and unreasonably hopeful. Go to bed, Caleb said, steering him down the hall. Henry grinned all the way to his room. Over the next few weeks, the dinners became routine. Ava texted about new restaurant openings with winking emojis, and Caleb found himself replying before he could second-guess it. The meetings started with spreadsheets and financial forecasts, but somehow always ended with embarrassing stories about Henry's Halloween costumes and debates about the best takeout in the city. Caleb kept telling himself it was just strategy, keeping things amicable for the merger's sake. He definitely wasn't checking his phone every 5 minutes waiting for Ava's messages. Henry, however, was not subtle. He strolled around the house dropping not-so-casual hints about what Caleb should wear. "That blue tie makes you look less like a grumpy CEO." And conveniently, lost Ava's contact card twice, forcing Caleb to call her directly. One evening, Caleb caught him standing on a chair, rearranging bookshelves in the living room. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked, folding his arms. "Making things look nice for Miss Ava," Henry said, hopping down with a satisfied grin. "She likes books, you know." Caleb sighed. "She's not coming over." Henry smirked. "Not yet." Caleb rubbed a hand down his face. "Go do your homework." Henry snickered all the way up the stairs. Dinner that night was supposed to be quick, just a follow-up on the merger contracts, but Ava arrived in a red dress that made Caleb forget how to string a sentence together. "You look well," he managed. Ava smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." By the time they'd cleared their plates, Caleb couldn't remember half of what they'd discussed. Ava rested her chin on her hand, eyes bright with amusement. "You're terrible at business dinners," she teased. "I what?" She grinned. "You haven't mentioned a single thing about the merger." Caleb grimaced. "Right. Sorry, I just relax." Ava laughed. "I don't mind. This is more fun." Caleb's lips quirked despite himself. "Maybe we should do more business dinners then." Ava raised a brow. "Are you asking me out, Mr. McKinsley?" "Maybe," he said, heart pounding annoyingly fast. She smirked. "Good. Because I was starting to think you'd never get around to it." When Caleb returned home, Henry was waiting on the stairs, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. "So," he drawled. "How was business?" Caleb groaned. "Bed. Now." Henry just cackled, racing down the hall. Caleb watched him go, shaking his head. But he couldn't quite stop the smile tugging at his mouth. The next day, Henry peeked around the corner of the office, watching Caleb rub his temples over a stack of paperwork. The charity gala invitation lay abandoned on the desk, the gold foil lettering practically begging for attention. "Dad," Henry said, inching into the room, "you should go to the gala." "It's like super important, right?" Caleb groaned. "It's a pointless networking event. But Miss Ava might be there," Henry pointed out, trying for casual but failing spectacularly. Caleb's pen stilled. "Henry," he warned. Henry shrugged. "I'm just saying. Plus, you can talk business and stuff." He paused. "Maybe invite her?" Caleb squinted. "It's not a date." "Obviously," Henry said, not even trying to hide his smirk. "Just business." Caleb sighed, already feeling cornered. "Fine. I'll ask her." Henry fist-pumped silently on the way out. That evening, Caleb typed out the invitation 3 times, deleting each version with a groan. Finally, he settled on a short, professional message, only to flinch when Ava's reply popped up almost instantly. "Sounds fun. Looking forward to it." A winking emoji followed. Caleb stared at the screen, half horrified, half intrigued. Henry peeked in, catching the look on his face. "She said yes, didn't she?" Caleb huffed. "Go to bed." Henry grinned. "You're welcome." On the night of the gala, Caleb adjusted his tie for the 5th time, glancing at the door every 2 seconds. When Ava stepped through, he merely forgot to breathe. Her dress was dark green, elegant without being flashy, and her hair fell in loose waves. She smirked at his deer-in-headlights look. "You clean up nicely," she said, eyes glinting. "You, too," Caleb stammered, ears warm. Ava's lips twitched. "Good to know." The evening passed in a blur of handshakes and polite smiles. Caleb tried to focus on the speeches, but Ava's arm brushing his every few minutes made that nearly impossible. She was charming and effortlessly composed, chatting with board members like they were old friends. At one point, she leaned in to murmur, "You're staring." Caleb jerked back, flustered. "Sorry, I just, She chuckled. "Relax, Mr. McKinsley. I don't mind." Caleb groaned inwardly. He was never living this down. When the band started playing, Ava raised a brow. "Do CEOs dance?" Caleb snorted. "Not well." She smirked. "We'll see." Somehow, he found himself on the dance floor, Ava's hand warm in his. It wasn't as mortifying as he expected, mostly because Ava led with an amused smile and zero judgment for his 2 left feet attempts. By the time the song ended, Caleb was almost relaxed. Almost. A camera flash went off nearby, and Caleb turned, half-blinded. A photographer waved sheepishly, clearly thrilled with the candid shot of them laughing, faces too close for just business. Caleb sighed. "Great." Ava chuckled. "Well, that'll be fun on the morning news." He groaned. "I'll fire someone." Ava smirked. "You won't." He sighed. "No. I won't." The next morning, Henry bounded into the kitchen, tablet in hand. "Dad! You're on Twitter!" Caleb grimaced. "What?" Henry shoved the screen under his nose. A photo of him and Ava, mid-laugh, was trending, captions ranging from "Billionaire's secret romance" to "New power couple alert." Caleb closed his eyes, contemplating fleeing the country. Henry snickered. "You guys look cute." Caleb grunted. "Eat your cereal." Henry shrugged. "Okay, Dad. Whatever you say." A beat. "Hey, can I call her mom yet?" Caleb choked on his coffee. "Henry!" Henry grinned, grabbing his backpack. "Just asking." At the office, Caleb barely made it to his desk before his assistant, Melissa, pounced. She held a gossip magazine, waving it with the glee of someone who lived for drama. "So," she drawled, smirk wide. "Anything you want to share?" Caleb glared. "No." Melissa snorted. "Uh-huh. Sure. Totally believable." Caleb pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's not, she's not, we were discussing the merger." "Oh, is that what they're calling it now?" Melissa said, eyes gleaming. "I'm sure your merger has nothing to do with her eyes or her laugh or that whole dance floor moment." Caleb groaned. "Do I pay you for this?" She smirked. "Not enough." By lunchtime, Caleb's inbox was flooded with emails from board members either offering congratulations or awkwardly suggesting HR-approved relationship disclosure forms. Caleb deleted each one with increasing irritation. Ava, meanwhile, texted a screenshot of the article with a simple, "Guess we're famous now." Caleb's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "Sorry about that." "Didn't mean for it to relax," Ava replied instantly. "I don't mind." A winking emoji followed. Caleb stared, torn between relief and something annoyingly warm. That evening, Henry pranced into the living room, already in pajamas and grinning. "Miss Ava's nice. You should marry her." Caleb spluttered. "Henry, I'm just saying." Henry continued. "She's pretty, she's nice, and she likes you even when you're grumpy. Plus, she can cook." Caleb rubbed a hand down his face. "Henry." Henry smirked. "You're welcome." Caleb groaned, but the protest was half-hearted at best. Later, as he scrolled through the news articles, most of them full of insinuations and grinning photos of him and Ava, he couldn't quite suppress the small smile tugging at his mouth. For once, Henry's meddling hadn't been a total disaster. Not that Caleb would admit it. By December, Ava was a regular at their dinner table, slipping into their lives with a kind of ease that left Caleb both relieved and mildly alarmed. Henry, meanwhile, was thriving, constantly dropping not-so-subtle hints about wedding bells and future siblings. Caleb had half a mind to ground him just for the smug grins alone. That evening, Caleb was halfway through assembling a department store nightmare of a toy train set when Henry burst into the living room, red-cheeked and grinning. "Miss Ava's coming over," he announced. "She said she's bringing cookies." Caleb glanced at the lopsided tracks and cursed under his breath. "Henry, relax, Dad," Henry said, already flinging tinsel at the tree with the enthusiasm of a caffeinated elf. "She's just coming for dinner." "It's Christmas Eve," Caleb groaned. "Please don't mention mistletoe." Henry smirked. "No promises." By the time Ava knocked, the living room was a festive battlefield of garland, mismatched ornaments, and half-strung lights. Caleb opened the door, only to freeze at the sight of her in a red coat dusted with snow, cheeks pink and a tin of cookies in her hands. "Merry Christmas," she said, eyes warm. Caleb cleared his throat. "You too." Henry barreled into her legs, grabbing the cookie tin with a grin. "Did you bring the ones with chocolate?" Ava laughed, ruffling his hair. "Extra chocolate." Henry darted off with a shout of victory, leaving Caleb to trail after Ava, more flustered than he wanted to admit. Dinner was a blur of laughter, Henry talking a mile a minute between bites of turkey and mashed potatoes. Ava was endlessly patient, indulging his ramblings about school projects and how Caleb had burned breakfast that morning. "It was 1 pancake," Caleb muttered. Henry snorted. "It was 3. Ava smirked. "I'm sure they were delicious." Caleb rolled his eyes. "Traitor." When the dishes were cleared, Henry insisted on decorating the tree. "Because ours looks sad," he declared, dragging out boxes of ornaments. Ava chuckled, pulling out a star with chipped edges. "Vintage," she teased. "Cheap," Caleb corrected, ears warm. Henry, somehow covered in tinsel, clambered onto a chair. "Miss Ava, you put the lights on." "Dad sucks at it." "Henry," Caleb groaned. Ava smirked. "I'd be happy to." They maneuvered around each other in a delicate dance of untangling lights and untimely sparks. Ava's laugh rang out more than once, usually right after Caleb smacked his head on a branch or swore under his breath. Henry beamed, shoving candy canes onto branches with no discernible pattern. By the time the last ornament was hung, the room glowed in soft hues of gold and green. Ava leaned back, eyes bright. "Perfect," she declared. Henry sighed dramatically. "We're missing something." Caleb arched a brow. "What?" Henry grinned, pointing above them. "Mistletoe." Caleb followed his gaze and nearly groaned out loud. A sprig hung machinously from the ceiling, probably courtesy of Henry's earlier rampage with the decorations. Ava raised a brow, smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Caleb cleared his throat. "We, don't have to." Ava leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. "Merry Christmas, Mr. McKinsley," she murmured, eyes glinting. Caleb's brain short-circuited. "Aye, you, Mary," Henry snickered. "You're so smooth, Dad." Caleb scowled. "Go to bed." Henry only smirked, skipping down the hall with an obnoxious rendition of Jingle Bells. Ava chuckled, cheeks warm. "He's a menace." "Tell me about it," Caleb muttered, but the fondness in his tone ruined the effect. They settled on the couch, the tree casting flickering patterns across the walls. Ava tucked her legs beneath her, head tilting to rest on Caleb's shoulder without pretense. Caleb, after a brief moment of sheer panic, relaxed. Henry peeked around the corner, grinning wide enough to split his face, and made kissy faces that had Caleb glaring half-heartedly. "Go to bed," Caleb mouthed. Henry rolled his eyes but scampered off, humming carols at a volume that suggested spite. Ava laughed softly. "He's persistent. Gets it from his mother," Caleb said, smile dimming just a fraction. Ava's hand covered his, warm and steady. "You're doing great," she said simply, no pity or hesitation. Caleb swallowed. "Thanks." The snow picked up outside, swirling in soft flurries against the windows. Ava's fingers stayed intertwined with his, her head a warm weight on his shoulder, and for once, Caleb didn't feel the crushing silence that usually came with Christmas Eve. Eventually, Ava dozed off, her breathing even and soft. Caleb stayed still, half afraid to move, one arm draped awkwardly across her shoulders. He should have been uncomfortable, but instead, something warm and content settled in his chest, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. When midnight rolled around, Henry crept back in, dragging a blanket and barely hiding a smirk. He draped it over them with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball, winking at Caleb's glare. "Merry Christmas," Henry whispered, grinning. Caleb sighed, rolling his eyes. "Go to bed." Henry snickered but obliged, leaving Caleb alone with Ava and the glow of the tree. The snow outside muffled the city sounds, leaving only the soft crackle of the fireplace and Ava's even breathing. Caleb let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, glancing at the woman asleep on his shoulder and the kid who'd somehow roped them both into this mess. For the first time in a long time, the emptiness didn't seem so heavy. Maybe Henry was right. Caleb settled back, letting his eyes drift shut, a faint smile on his face. A year passed faster than Caleb expected. Ava's shoes by the door, her laughter filling the kitchen, and Henry's endless chatter about school and sports were all just part of life now. Caleb's apartment was too small for all of them, so they'd started house hunting, looking for somewhere with a backyard big enough for Henry's soccer practice and Ava's ambitious garden plans. On a warm Saturday, they set up a picnic in the park, blankets spread out beneath a massive oak tree. Ava poured lemonade, Henry devoured sandwiches like they were running out, and Caleb fidgeted, checking his pocket every few minutes. Henry caught his eye and grinned, eyes glinting with conspiracy. He gave a thumbs up, almost too eager. Caleb glared. "Subtle." Henry shrugged. "She's distracted." "Do it now!" Caleb shot him a look but pushed himself up, clearing his throat. "Ava?" She glanced over, smile soft. Can I, talk to you for a sec?" he managed, palms sweating. Ava frowned, but got to her feet, brushing crumbs from her dress. Caleb took a breath, tried to remember all the lines he'd rehearsed, and promptly forgot every single one. "Everything okay?" Ava asked, head tilting. Caleb's heart tried to beat its way out of his chest. Yeah, actually, no," he blurted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, yes. God. I'm terrible at this." Ava's brow arched, a smile tugging at her lips. "At what?" Caleb swallowed, dropping to one knee before he could rethink it. Ava's eyes widened. "Oh," she breathed. Henry, already vibrating with excitement, scampered over, practically shoving the ring box into Caleb's hand. Caleb shot him a look. "Subtle," he mouthed. Henry grinned. "Hurry up," he whispered loudly. Caleb exhaled, popping the box open with fingers that definitely weren't shaking. I was going to say something really romantic, but I can't remember any of it," he admitted. "So, will you marry me?" Ava's hands flew to her mouth, eyes bright. For a terrifying moment, she didn't say anything, and Caleb's heart plummeted. Then she nodded, laughing through tears. "Yes," she managed, pulling him up into a kiss that had Henry gagging loudly behind them. "Gross," Henry declared. "But yay!" Caleb huffed, wrapping an arm around Ava's waist, grinning so wide it hurt. Henry smirked, crossing his arms. "Told you she'd say yes." They moved in 2 months later, into a house with too many rooms and a yard Henry immediately claimed for soccer practice. Ava brought boxes of books and jars of homemade jam, and Caleb's closet somehow shrunk by half overnight. Henry, meanwhile, delighted in every second of it. He bounded down the stairs every morning to find Ava already in the kitchen, packing his lunch with little smiley-face notes and extra cookies. She made pancakes on Saturdays, let him stay up late to watch movies, and never seemed too tired to listen to him ramble about school. For Caleb, the change was quieter, falling asleep beside her, finding his favorite ties already ironed, coming home to a kitchen that smelled like fresh bread and laughter. It was almost too perfect. and then the article started. Caleb skimmed the first headline, Merger or Marriage? Did Ava Hastings play the long game? And nearly cracked his phone screen. A dozen more followed, some speculating on insider trading, others accusing Ava of using the merger to boost her company's stock. Caleb gritted his teeth, scrolling through article after article, each worse than the last. He barely heard Henry's excited chatter about a school project, barely tasted dinner that night. Ava noticed, of course. She frowned at him over the kitchen counter, brow creased. "You've been quiet." Caleb forced a smile. "Just work stuff." She hesitated. "Anything I can help with?" He bit the inside of his cheek. "No. I've got it." Her smile slipped. He couldn't stop reading. Every article, every comment thread, every tweet that called Ava a gold digger and worse. When the finance blog published a timeline of their relationship alongside stock price graphs, Caleb's stomach churned. He spent 3 days trying to make sense of it, mind spinning with numbers and timelines that didn't add up. When Ava touched his arm, voice soft and concerned, he pulled away without meaning to. She flinched. "Caleb? It's nothing," he muttered too fast. Ava's eyes narrowed. "Really? Because you haven't looked me in the eye in days." "It's nothing," he snapped, then winced at the hurt in her eyes. "I just need to think." She took a breath, jaw tight. "Right. Let me know when you've figured it out." She turned on her heel, the door swinging shut behind her. The house felt empty and too quiet, Henry's music muffled through his bedroom walls. Caleb scrubbed a hand down his face, guilt twisting hard. Henry cornered him the next morning, eyes wide and confused. "Why's Miss Ava sad?" Caleb hesitated. "It's complicated, bud." Henry's frown deepened. "Did you guys fight?" "Not exactly." Henry's eyes narrowed, too sharp for a 7-year-old. "Did you mess it up?" Caleb flinched. "Henry, you did," Henry accused, eyes bright with anger and something too close to tears. "Why?" "You promised." Caleb's heart splintered. "I'm just trying to figure things out." Henry's fists clenched. "Figure what out?" "She loves you, stupid." "Henry, you promised." Henry shouted, voice cracking. "You promised we'd be a family." Caleb's chest ached. He tried to reach out, but Henry bolted, slamming his door hard enough to rattle the walls. The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb sank onto the couch, head in his hands, and for the first time in years, he had no idea what to do. The house felt hollow without Ava. Her coat was gone from the hallway hook, her books missing from the shelves, the kitchen eerily spotless without her half-finished cups of tea. Caleb's chest ached every time he walked past the empty guest room. Henry wasn't helping. He spent most of the weekend locked in his room, only emerging for meals and shooting Caleb betrayed looks before stomping back upstairs. The silence stretched until Caleb couldn't stand it. He knocked, waiting until Henry finally cracked the door open, eyes red-rimmed and splotchy. "Hey," Caleb tried. "Can we talk?" Henry glared. "You gonna make her leave again?" Caleb winced. "That's not, she just needed space." "Right," Henry snorted. "Because you're scared of being happy." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Henry, you are!" Henry snapped, voice cracking. "You think she's gonna leave, so you made her leave first. That's stupid." Caleb's throat felt too tight. "It's not that simple." Henry's eyes were bright and accusing. "Yeah, it is. You don't do that to people you love." Caleb's breath caught, guilt twisting deep. "Henry, you said we'd be a family." Henry bit out, wiping at his eyes with an angry swipe. "You promised." The door slammed hard enough to rattle the walls. Caleb stood in the hallway, gut hollow, hands shaking. He dragged himself to the kitchen, barely seeing the stack of dishes or the sunlight slanting through the windows. Ava's favorite mug was still in the drying rack, white porcelain with a chip on the handle. Caleb stared at it, mind a spinning blur of articles and accusations and Ava's hurt eyes when she'd walked out the door. He sank into a chair, elbows on the table, head in his hands. The next morning, he showed up at the office early, snapping orders and burying himself in spreadsheets. Anything to drown out Henry's words. Anything to forget the way Ava's voice had cracked when she said she was leaving. Melissa sidled into his office around noon, unimpressed with the disaster of files spread across his desk. "You look like death," she declared, plopping into the chair opposite him. Caleb grunted, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Not now, Melissa," she snorted. "Yeah, no. You've been moping for 3 days. Fix it." "It's not that simple," he muttered. "Sure it is," Melissa said, waving a gossip magazine with the enthusiasm of a referee brandishing a red card. "Go grovel." Caleb glared. "That's not helpful." Melissa shrugged. "Neither is hiding in your office like a coward," he groaned. "Did you need something?" "Yeah," she said, smirk widening. "For you to stop being an idiot." Caleb dropped his head onto the desk with a thud. The articles didn't stop. Comments flooded in faster than he could delete them, each one gnawing at his nerves. The accusations felt too plausible, the timeline too neat. Every smile and soft laugh and warm look from Avery played in his head, tainted by the nagging whisper of what if. By the third day, he barely slept. His office chair creaked as he leaned back, eyes gritty, monitor glaring bright with spreadsheets that all blurred together. He stared at Ava's contact name on his phone until the screen dimmed, then stuffed it in a drawer, chest tight. He spent the weekend sifting through documents, fingers stiff and eyes burning, piecing together numbers and deals and transactions until his head pounded. And then, buried in the mess of emails and old contracts, he found it, proof that Ava had turned down a dozen offers better than his, ones that would have handed her a fortune without half the risk. Caleb stared at the screen, breath stuttering. The spreadsheets blurred, heart pounding hard enough to hurt. "Idiot," he muttered, running a hand over his face. He grabbed his keys, barely remembering to lock the door on his way out. Henry's bedroom door stayed shut, but Caleb couldn't fix that yet. He had one stop to make first. Ava's sister lived across town, a modest apartment above a bakery. Caleb parked in a daze, palms damp and mind spinning with apologies that all sounded pathetic. Ava opened the door, hair in a messy bun and eyes tired. Her face shuddered the moment she saw him, expression cold and closed off. "Caleb," she said flatly. He swallowed. "Ava, please. Just 5 minutes." Her jaw clenched. "I don't have anything to say to you. Please," he managed, voice cracking. "Just listen." She hesitated, eyes flicking to the hallway. He took the chance to push the folder into her hands, fingers shaking. "I found these," he said too fast. "The offers you turned down. The ones that, God, Ava, I'm sorry. I was an idiot." Her eyes narrowed, flicking to the papers. "You think this makes up for, I know it doesn't," he blurted, heart pounding. I panicked. I've never." He scrubbed a hand over his face, breath hitching. "I've never been good at this." Ava's eyes stayed cold. Caleb's stomach twisted, throat tight. "I shouldn't have, God, I should have trusted you," he admitted, voice raw. "I was scared. Of losing you. Of getting this all wrong. But Henry, he was right. I shouldn't have pushed you away." Ava's fingers tightened on the papers, eyes flicking over the lines with a frown. For a long moment, the only sound was her breathing, shallow and uneven. Caleb held his breath, palms damp. "Ava," he tried, voice cracking. She looked up, eyes bright with hurt. "You really think I did this for money?" He flinched. I didn't, God, I was stupid." Her jaw clenched, hurt bleeding into anger. "Yeah," she bit out. "You were." Caleb's chest ached. "I know. Please. I can't lose you." Her eyes flickered, fingers white-knuckled on the papers. For a heartbeat, she just stared at him, lips pressed thin. Then she exhaled, shoving the folder back into his chest. "I need time," she said flatly. "Don't call me." The door closed with a click that felt like a punch to the ribs. Caleb stared at the chipped paint, heart stuttering, and for a long moment he couldn't breathe. Back home, Henry was waiting in the living room, arms crossed and eyes red. Caleb sank onto the couch, head in his hands, words stuck in his throat. Henry's glare was sharp enough to cut. "Did you fix it?" Caleb's breast shuddered. "She needs time." Henry scoffed, eyes bright and accusing. "You really messed it up, huh?" Caleb winced. "Yeah," he rasped. "I really did." Henry sulked for 2 days, arms crossed and answers clipped. Caleb tried talking, apologizing, even bribing with ice cream, but Henry just glared, lips pressed tight. By the 3rd day, Caleb gave up, retreating to his office with a sigh. When he emerged, Henry was gone. Caleb's chest tightened until he spotted a note stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a frog, "Gone to Jared's house. Don't follow me." Caleb scrubbed a hand down his face. Perfect. By the time Henry returned that evening, still scowling and muttering under his breath, Caleb was ready with a cautious apology. Before he could get a word out, Henry shoved past him with a glare, retreating upstairs and slamming the door hard enough to make the windows rattle. Caleb pinched the bridge of his nose. "Great," he muttered. That night he barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, Ava's hurt expression flashed behind his eyelids, paired with Henry's tear-bright eyes and the echo of "You promised." By morning, he was a zombie in a wrinkled dress shirt, chugging coffee and ignoring Melissa's side eyes. She dropped a pile of contracts on his desk with a huff. "You look awful," Caleb groaned. "Thanks," Melissa snorted. "Fix it." "I'm trying," he grumbled. "Try harder," she snapped, striding out with her heels clicking loud enough to give him a headache. The next few days were a blur of work and silence. Henry barely spoke, even at dinner, shoving peas around his plate with a frown. Caleb spent every spare second writing, scribbling over drafts of apology letters that all sounded pathetic. By the end of the week, his trash can was overflowing with crumpled paper, and he still had no idea what to say. That Saturday, Caleb stumbled into the living room to find Henry sprawled on the floor, sketchbook open and tongue poking out in concentration. Caleb hesitated. "Henry, I'm still mad at you," Henry said flatly, not looking up. Caleb winced. "I know. I'm sorry." Henry's pencil scratched over the paper. "You should tell Miss Ava that." Caleb grimaced. "She won't talk to me." Henry finally looked up, eyes narrowed. "Did you try saying sorry?" Yeah, but..." Henry rolled his eyes. "You're hopeless." Caleb groaned. "I know." Henry huffed, snapping the sketchbook shut. "You need a plan." Caleb frowned. "A plan?" Henry smirked. "Obviously. You messed up big. You can't just say sorry and call it a day." Caleb arched a brow. "And you have a plan?" Henry grinned, eyes glinting. "Maybe." Caleb's stomach twisted. "I'm afraid to ask." Henry dragged him upstairs, grinning with the kind of excitement that usually led to disaster. Caleb half expected glitter bombs or a PowerPoint presentation, but Henry only yanked open his closet, tossing clothes with reckless abandon. "You're going to her favorite bookstore," Henry declared, shoving a decent-looking shirt into Caleb's arms. "And you're bringing flowers. Not those gross yellow ones, she likes the white ones." Caleb blinked. Henry continued, ignoring him completely. "You're gonna write a letter. Not one of those boring ones. A good one." Caleb stared. "You're serious?" Henry shot him a glare. "Do you want her back or not?" Caleb sighed. "Fine." Henry grinned. "Good." 2 hours later, Caleb found himself standing in front of the bookstore, fingers clenching and unclenching around a bouquet of white lilies. The handwritten letter felt heavy in his coat pocket, the ink smudged in places where his hands had trembled. Henry, lurking nearby with a poorly hidden smirk, gave a thumbs up. Caleb shot him a look. "Go home." Henry shrugged. Nope. Caleb groaned but stepped inside, heart pounding. The bell chimed overhead, soft and familiar, and the scent of old paper and lavender wrapped around him. Ava was at the counter, hair tumbling loose and eyes fixed on a magazine. Her shoulders stiffened when the door closed behind him. Caleb cleared his throat. Ava. She froze, fingers tightening on the magazine. What do you want? Caleb's mouth went dry. To talk. Please. Ava's jaw clenched. I'm busy. 5 minutes, he pleaded. Please. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the lilies and then to the letter clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Finally, she sighed, stepping around the counter with a frown. Caleb's heart pounded as he stumbled through an apology, words tumbling too fast and breathless. He admitted to panicking, to reading too much into headlines, to letting fear get the best of him. He admitted to being an idiot, to hurting her, to breaking Henry's heart with his cowardice. Ava's eyes were glossy and narrowed, lips pressed in. Caleb's voice cracked. I know I messed up. I should have trusted you. I should have. God, Ava, I'm so sorry. I love you. Ava's breath itched, fingers trembling around the letter. Caleb, please, he rasped. Just don't give up on us. For a moment, she didn't move, eyes fixed on the lilies and the letter and the pleading in his eyes. Then, finally, her shoulders slumped. You're such an idiot, she whispered, voice shaking. Caleb's breath caught. Yeah, he choked. I am. She made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh, fingers clenching in the front of his coat. Caleb barely had time to react before she was kissing him, the lilies crushed between them and her hands fisting in his shirt. Caleb's heart stuttered, relief crashing so hard his knees almost gave out. Henry's obnoxious clapping broke the moment, loud and gleeful. Finally! Henry crowed, popping up behind a shelf with a face-splitting grin. Told you it'd work! Caleb groaned, forehead dropping to Ava's shoulder. Oh my God! Ava laughed wetly, eyes bright and cheeks streaked with tears. You knew? She accused, swatting at Henry with no real heat. Henry shrugged. Duh. You guys are obvious. Caleb groaned. Henry smirked. You're welcome. Caleb rolled his eyes, but his chest felt light for the first time in weeks. Ava's fingers stayed tangled in his coat, her forehead pressed to his, and for once, Caleb didn't fight the stupid, giddy smile tugging at his mouth. The wedding was a blur of white roses, laughter, and Henry sprinting around the venue in a tiny suit, bossing people around like a CEO in training. Caleb adjusted his cufflinks for the 10th time, wiping sweaty palms down his jacket as Melissa rolled her eyes from the sidelines. Relax, she snorted. She already said yes. Caleb groaned. I'm fine. Melissa smirked. You're sweating through your tux. Caleb shot her a look, but his pulse didn't slow. He caught a glimpse of Ava at the end of the aisle, veil trailing and eyes bright, and forgot how to breathe. Henry beamed, clutching the ring pillow with the seriousness of someone handling nuclear codes. He shot Caleb a thumbs up, mouthing, Don't mess this up. Caleb's lips twitched, tension melting. The ceremony was a blur of vows and soft laughter, and Henry loudly whispering, Kiss her already. Caleb barely managed to pull Ava close, the crowd's applause muffled under the pounding of his heart. At the reception, Henry insisted on giving a speech, dragging a step stool to the microphone with the determination of a general going to war. Ava tried to hide her laugh behind a champagne glass. Caleb braced himself. Henry cleared his throat, grinning wide enough to split his face. Hi, he chirped. So, if you don't know me, I'm Henry McKinsley, and I made this happen. The crowd snickered. Caleb groaned. Henry beamed. It's true. If I didn't tell Miss Ava that my dad was super nice and single, they'd still be boring and alone. Melissa choked on her drink. Caleb buried his face in his hands. Ava giggled, eyes bright. Henry plowed on, undeterred. So you're welcome, he declared, grinning. Oh, and congrats or whatever. Love you, Dad. Love you, Mom. Caleb's chest ached, eyes stinging. Ava squeezed his hand, sniffling with a soft laugh. Henry scampered down from the stage, skidding to a halt in front of them with a proud grin. Nailed it. Caleb rolled his eyes. Subtle. Henry shrugged. You're welcome. The first dance was warm and soft, Ava's head resting on Caleb's shoulder, Henry weaving between guests with a grin. Caleb's hands didn't stop shaking until Ava squeezed them, eyes glinting. You're not gonna faint, are you? She teased. Caleb snorted. No promises. She laughed, eyes soft. We did it. Caleb exhaled, tension unwinding. Yeah, he breathed. We did. Henry darted past, grabbing their hands with a grin. Come on. We're doing cake. Caleb groaned, letting himself be dragged. Ava's fingers laced with his, warm and steady. The cake was a mess of frosting and laughter, Henry smashing a piece into Caleb's face with a gleeful cackle. Caleb sputtered, grabbing a napkin, and Ava snorted, snapping a photo with a smirk. Blackmail, she declared, eyes twinkling. Caleb sighed. Great. Hours blurred together, a mix of dancing and hugs and Melissa's terrible toast that involved too many office jokes. By the time the sun dipped low, Henry was yawning around a cookie, blinking heavy-lidded. Caleb hoisted him up, chuckling at his sleepy grumbles. You're wiped. Henry huffed. I am not. Sure. Caleb smirked. Ava smoothed a hand over Henry's messy hair, eyes warm. Henry blinked blearily at her, head thumping against Caleb's shoulder. You're pretty, he mumbled. I'm glad Dad married you. Ava snorted, cheeks pink. Thanks, bud. Henry yawned, eyes fluttering shut. You're welcome. Caleb chuckled, chest light. They managed to slip away, past lingering guests and Melissa's smug grin. The car was warm, headlights slicing through the dark, and Henry conked out in the back seat, snoring softly. Ava leaned into Caleb's side, eyes half-lidded. We survived. Caleb smirked. Barely. She laughed, fingers lacing with his. I love you. Caleb's throat tightened. Love you too. Henry, sprawled over the back seat in a tangle of limbs and tiny tucks, clutched a photo to his chest. One they'd taken under the oak tree, Ava laughing, Caleb grinning, Henry between them with a grin wide enough to split his face. Caleb glanced in the mirror, chest tight and warm. Ava's fingers tightened around his, soft and steady. Hey, she murmured, eyes glinting. We did good. Caleb snorted. Pretty sure Henry did all the work. Ava smirked. True. He chuckled, eyes flicking to the mirror, Henry's cheek smushed against the seat, mouth open, fingers clutching the photo with a white-knuckled grip. Caleb's chest ached, heart full and too tight. Ava's head rested on his shoulder, her breathing soft and even. The road stretched ahead, dark and winding, but the weight pressing down on his chest felt lighter than it had in years. Caleb's lips quirked. You ready for this? Ava snorted. The mortgage or the kid? Both, he smirked. She laughed. Too late to back out now. He chuckled, heart warm. The city lights blurred past, soft and hazy, and for once, Caleb didn't worry about tomorrow or what-ifs or headlines. Henry snored in the back seat, mumbling something about cake in his sleep, clutching the family photo tight. Caleb's chest tightened, fingers squeezing Ava's. She leaned in, eyes glinting. You're smiling. Caleb groaned. I am not. She laughed, warm and bright, and Caleb's lips twitched despite himself. The house glowed soft with porch lights, snow blanketing the lawn. Henry mumbled when Caleb scooped him up, half awake and pouting. Go back to sleep. Caleb chuckled, ruffling his hair. Henry yawned. Not tired. Right. Caleb snorted. Ava smirked, unlocking the door with a click. Warmth rushed out, carrying the scent of pine and cinnamon and too many Christmas cookies. Caleb stepped inside, toeing off shoes and nudging Henry's door open with a foot. Henry curled into his comforter with a sleepy grumble, clutching the photo to his chest. Ava tucked him in, brushing hair from his eyes with a soft smile. Caleb's chest ached, heart tight and warm. Ava turned, eyes glinting. "You're staring." Caleb huffed. "I am not." She smirked, pulling him down by his tie. "Sure." He groaned, but his hands didn't shake when they wrapped around her waist, and her laugh was warm against his mouth, chest to chest and soft and steady and real. Outside, snow fell slow and quiet, blanketing the driveway and rooftops in white. The house creaked, settling around them, warm and soft and full of too many coats in the hallway and Henry's sneakers by the door and Ava's books cluttering every flat surface. Messy and imperfect in theirs. Caleb huffed a breath, forehead against hers, eyes falling shut. Ava's lips quirked. "Told you we'd be okay." Caleb's chest ached, fingers squeezing hers. "Yeah," he breathed, voice soft. "You did." The next morning, sunlight slanted through the curtains, warm and golden. Caleb woke to the sound of muffled giggles and the smell of something burning. He groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Ava stirred beside him, eyes squinting open. "Is that?" Caleb sighed. "I'll handle it." He stumbled into the kitchen, blinking blearily. Henry was on a chair by the stove, wielding a spatula with the determination of a general leading an army. Flour covered the counters, eggshells littered the sink, and something black and smoking sizzled in a pan. "Henry!" Caleb started, pinching the bridge of his nose. Henry whipped around, eyes wide. Surprise?" Caleb sighed. "What?" "I was making breakfast," Henry declared, pointing at the scorched pancakes with a sheepish grin. "For you and Miss, Mom." Caleb's heart stuttered. "Mom?" Henry's ears turned red. "I mean, she's your wife now, right?" he mumbled, kicking at the floor. "So I can." Caleb's throat tightened. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, pulling Henry into a hug that left his eyes stinging. Henry squawked, muffled against his chest, but his arms wrapped tight around Caleb's neck. "You're such a dork," Henry muttered, sniffling. Caleb huffed a laugh, voice thick. "Love you too, bud." Henry grumbled, face buried in his shoulder, but didn't let go. Ava appeared in the doorway, hair mussed and eyes warm. She took in the flour-covered counters, the smoking pan, and Caleb half-choking Henry with a hug, lips quirking. "Everything okay?" she smirked. Henry squirmed, face red. "We're good," he yelped, wriggling free with a huff. "We were, making pancakes." Ava snorted. "I see." Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, ears warm. "We'll clean it up." Henry groaned. "We?" Caleb arched a brow. "You burned it." Henry scowled. "Traitor." Ava chuckled, wrapping an arm around Caleb's waist, head tucked against his shoulder. Her fingers laced with his, warm and steady, and the tension in his chest melted. "I like burnt pancakes," she said with a wink. Henry perked up. "See, Dad? It's fine." Caleb rolled his eyes, but his chest felt light, warmth spreading down to his fingertips. They ended up on the couch, a pile of 2 crispy pancakes between them and blankets tangled over legs. Henry devoured his breakfast, syrup smeared on his cheek and eyes bright, chattering a mile a minute about school and video games and the new movie he wanted to see. Caleb let himself sink back, one arm around Ava's shoulders and the other ruffling Henry's hair, heart full and too tight. The rest of the day was a blur of board games and cookies and Henry's overenthusiastic decorating attempts that left the tree half buried in tinsel. Ava laughed until she couldn't breathe when Caleb nearly knocked the whole thing over trying to hang a star, Henry's giggles muffled against the couch cushions. By the time evening rolled around, Henry was out cold, snoring softly on the rug, clutching a candy cane and a half-unwrapped present. Caleb scooped him up, soft snores filling the hall as he carried him to bed, tucking blankets up to his chin. Henry mumbled in his sleep, fingers curling into the comforter, face soft and peaceful. Caleb's chest ached. Ava leaned in the doorway, eyes warm. "He's cute when he's not bossing us around," she teased. Caleb snorted. "You're encouraging him." She smirked. "Maybe." They made their way back to the living room, lights dimmed and fireplace crackling warm. The snow outside muffled the world, leaving only the glow of Christmas lights and the scent of pine and cinnamon. Ava curled into Caleb's side, fingers lacing with his, head on his shoulder. Caleb sighed, tension melting, forehead dropping to hers. "Thank you," he murmured, voice soft. Ava frowned, brow furrowing. "For what?" "For staying," he breathed. "For putting up with me. For God, for everything." Ava's eyes glinted. "I kind of like putting up with you." Caleb chuckled, throat tight. "You're insane." She laughed, breath warm against his neck. "Maybe." Caleb exhaled, fingers threading through her hair, chest tight and heart too full. "I love you," he rasped. Ava's eyes softened, a smile curving her lips. "Love you too," she murmured, fingers squeezing his. Caleb's breath stuttered, head dropping to her shoulder, eyes falling shut. The fire crackled soft and warm, and the world narrowed to Ava's fingers in his hair and her pulse beneath his palm and the soft snores from down the hall. For the first time in years, Caleb wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Wasn't afraid of headlines or board meetings or all the what-ifs that used to keep him up at night. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in blankets and each other, the snow falling soft and steady outside. Eventually, Ava yawned, snuggling deeper into his side. "You're stuck with us now," she teased, eyes half-lidded and smile soft. "No take-backs." Caleb snorted, chest light. "Wouldn't dream of it." Ava smirked. "Good." She drifted off with her head tucked against his chest, breasts soft and even. Caleb stayed awake a little longer, fingers tracing patterns over her back, heart beating steady beneath her ear. The house creaked in the wind, soft and familiar, and Caleb let his eyes fall shut, a smile tugging at his mouth. Messy and imperfect and real. Caleb sighed, tension unwinding, fingers lacing with Ava's. His last thought before sleep dragged him under was that he never felt so light. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, it really helps out the channel. And if you want more heartwarming and emotional stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this one, I'd love to hear your reactions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.